Stephenson. Kevin Stewart next to go. Shot at Glen Rose, Texas. Set him up on the heels. Now watch for the trap. Turn, waits, there's the flag. Yeah, it's getting better.
Did you see that heel shot? That was about as pretty as they come. 5-1. Now, boys, we have got something.
Well, hello, everybody. My name's Jacky Stephenson. My testimony is one of, I want to read scripture to you because I think this really explains my life. I did make it to the NFR 2 times in my life. I made it in 1984 when I was 21 years old, and I roped with my dad. You know, there's not very many father and sons that have made it, and I was honored and privileged to have made it with my dad in 1984. When I was 21 years old, it was both of our rookie years. And then again, in 1993, I qualified with Kevin Stewart. And I think it was Kevin's first year to make the NFR. And I think he made it, 10, 11, 12 times in a row after that. And I've not been back since, you know. But, you know, the Lord did allow us to win the average that year. And it's kind of embarrassing because I think we were like the second longest ever on 10. We were like 100 point something on 10 head. But you know what? We were faster than the other 14, so I guess that's still, and I still have the buckle. I'm not going to give it back. But when people ever ask me, you know, how long were y'all on 10? I'm like, oh, I don't know. We were a long time. But it's funny because I didn't understand, you know, because my life was not about rodeo. My life was, you know, I didn't grow up dreaming about being an NFR champion. I didn't grow up, you know, living, breathing, roping. I just kind of like, I don't know, in my life, my dad was a team roper, and to spend time with him, I team roped. You know, it wasn't really my desire and dream to become a team roper. I was more of a sports, you know, into sports and things like that. But once I finished, you know, my Little League career at 12, a family friend came to spend the summer with us, and I got to go out there and mess around with the rope, and you know, I could ride, and I had done all these things before. You know, being in my family, you could do that, but I really didn't pursue it. But at that time, that family friend, his name was Amy Gamblin. He was an elderly gentleman, you know, one of the original Turtle Association guys, one of the greatest horse trainers ever, and I really had a lot of respect for him. I got to being out there and hanging out with him, and he, you know, he started helping me, you know, doing stuff with the rope, and I started roping. Well, you know, that was when I was 12, and I am now 43, and from that time that I started there, I've never stopped. I've roped for 31 years. But, you know, it wasn't really my passion. It wasn't really who I was or what I was. It was just something that I did. And, you know, the Lord blessed me with ability. Not only that, but, you know, my dad was one of the greatest, you know, I still think he's one of the greatest all-time team roper headers. You know, his rookie year, he was 40 years old when he cracked out for his rookie year. And you know, I do believe that he could have made it, you know, all through his 30s, you know, from 30 to 40. I think if he'd have been pursuing it, he could have qualified for the NFR all those years. And he really pushed me. He worked hard, and he always saw to it that I had good horses. He saw to it that I was around people that could rope. You know, he didn't give me much room to fail. I was around successful people. He was successful. And, you know, I roped up to the level of the people that he had me around. I started roping against the men, you know, when I was 13. But anyway, what happened in my life was, you know, because of different circumstances, you know, situations in my mom and dad's life, you know, roping, you know, I don't want to say anything negative about my father because I don't know all the circumstances between my mom and dad's relationship. But when I was at the end of my 7th grade year, I knew that there were problems and that they were having difficulties, you know, because I could hear them late at night, you know, and they were arguing and stuff, and I guess, you know, in my way of seeing it, you know, looking back, I just thought that my mom, the way that I saw it presented to us was that, you know, my mom didn't want my dad to rope and rodeo as much as he did, and you know, it was his life. It was his lifelong dream, and it was his passion. And at the end of my 7th grade year, I was presented with an opportunity. My dad came up to me, my mom and my dad came up to me. I was 12 or 13 years old. And my dad said, I'm leaving. You know, your mom and I are having difficulties. I'm leaving, I'm going to Llano. And you can come with me or you can stay here. And you know, I was just beginning to know my dad. My dad was, you know, I guess at that time in his middle 30s. He was a handsome man. He was a big, strong man. I thought, you know, just an awesome dad, and I wanted to get to know him. And I knew that my sister, who was 10, and my little brother that was 6, I knew they weren't going to go with him. And so I went with my dad, and I guess they were separated for a couple of years. You know, praise the Lord that they worked it out. And you know, towards the end of my freshman year, our family got back together, and you know, the Lord healed everything. But in that time, I really kind of got off on the wrong track. I was hanging around men and hanging out with men a lot older than me, and I picked up some bad habits, and I learned some wrong things, and my life really took a wrong turn in there. Roping became to me a place where the party was. At 15, right in that time, I started drinking. At 16, I started experiencing with marijuana. By 17, I was taking the black market speed pills. At 18, I discovered cocaine. And by 19, I'd found the methamphetamine. I was a full-blown speed freak by the time I was 19. And that habit and that addiction followed me down through till I was 33. For 14 or 15 years, you know, I would take anything that would make me go faster, that would make my heart thump, that would give me that feeling. You know, I've done it all. I mean, I almost tried everything. You know, even when I made the finals when I was 21, you know, that was a part of my life. I made my dad's life miserable by the things that I did. You know, we made it to the finals when I was in 21 in 1984, but I know that it wasn't a very enjoyable experience for my dad, because half the time he didn't know where I was. Half the time I wouldn't come in that night. You know, he didn't know whether I was going to show up the next morning to rope or not to, you know, show up. And I didn't care, because, you know, the drugs had just made a hardened person out of me. And it took from that time when I was 21 all the way till I was 33 before I kicked it, before I broke away from it. And so my testimony really, as far as my roping, is I never fulfilled my potential because I was more interested in the parties and the drugs than being focused on what I was doing. So roping to me was just a party. That's where I went, because there may be some drugs there may be some girls there may be this, there may be that.
Jacky Stephenson, Kevin Stewart, Charlotte, Texas, and Glen Rose, Texas. Come on, Stewart. Come on, Stephenson. Fifth in the average. Starting to get a little hungry this time of the week, 5 and 4.
Even in 1993, when Kevin and I made it to the finals and won the average, in that first part of the year when we won all our money, I was straight. And we won 3/4 of our money from the middle, in the winter through June. And then in June, you know, I missed a steer at the Bob Feist, and I had another beer, and the next thing you know, a month later, I was back on the speed, on the crank. And that was my lifelong pattern, you know. And so it took into the October, in fall of, you know, I got married in between the finals in 84 and the finals in 93, 1989, I married Margaret. And that helped a lot, you know, because I kind of slowed down the drug activity. She knew what she was getting into. She knew she was marrying a wild person, a party person, you know. Wild man, you know, Wacky Jacky, wild man they call me. You know, I was a whole lot more famous for my partying and for my drugs and my not caring and my drinking than I was for my roping, you know. That's kind of sad, but it was true. And, you know, so when I married Margaret in 89, 1989, it slowed me down. You know, so where I loved her and I cared about her and I didn't want to lose her, so I was trying not to do the drugs and not to drink, but I was doing it some, dabbling and having to lie to her. You know, I'd fall into that circle, and then when I'd feel like, you know, she was about to find out or I was about to get caught, I'd back off for a little while. And I'd straighten up for a little while, and then something would happen, I'd fall back into the pattern again. And it just kept going like that. It was a cycle that I couldn't break. You know, and it always started with a beer, because, you know, I guarantee you that I'd have never tried any drug ever in my life if I would have not drank alcohol. You know, I'd get drunk and then I'd try. That, you know, the enemy would always see to it that when I drank, that somebody would come along with some, you know, some new kind of drug or some kind of pill or something to try or experience. And when I was drinking, I would not say no. I'd do anything. You know, like the old drug saying when I was growing up was, just say no. Well, I found out that drinking beer severely hampered my ability to say no. Actually, it took it away. Matter of fact, when I had 3 or 4 beers, I'd say yes to anything. And so, you know, that's the pattern in my life was to, you know, get straight, have some sort of disappointment, miss a steer, do something to make me mad, and the way that I handled it was with a beer. And then it wasn't long before I was 2 beers, 3 beers, 6 beers, and then once I got to where I was getting drunk, well, I started thinking about the drugs again, and pretty soon I was back in that cycle. Well, it took until the fall of 1996, you know, before God began to, through a series of